And if you're a singer, you better not record a song on an album that you don't really love playing. You're going to play that song for the rest of your career. The pronoun game is another one. Somebody will walk up to another person and go, "You won't believe what she said." And then the first person gets this big reveal. But in real life, you would never do that.
Just in terms of trying to keep your job, everybody's like fighting and clawing and scratching to keep their current job, to get the next one. They don't even want your advice because they need to do everything themselves.
There may be a couple other jokes that I would take back, but only because I continue to learn and grow, and we don't want to offend regular viewers or filmmakers. I'm disabled. I have less than 50% of my hearing left and diagnosed with depression and anxiety. The books are just another way for me to try and let people out there know they can be heroes, even if someone tells them they can't.
Hey, welcome to the Create Unknown, the home of Make Something Mean Something. I am Kevin Lieber. We're live on Discord, as always, because it is TCU night, Wednesday night, 6 p.m. Eastern. We have our awesome patrons in the episode chat. We have lurkers hanging out with us for free who are non-patrons, but future patrons. And with me, as always, is Matthew Tabor.
Yeah, we're going to pull a Phil DeFranco and jump right into it tonight. Since our guest today is the son of a small-town preacher, our introduction will be properly biblical. Aficionados of theology and colonial American history will recall that 280 years ago in the humid Northampton, Massachusetts summer of 1741, Jonathan Edwards delivered a sermon entitled "Sinners in the Hands of an Angry God," which included vivid descriptions of the fiery furnace of hell, while noting that God offers us all an opportunity to be forgiven for our sins. This marked the beginning of the First Great Awakening, and after toiling in a movie theater, today's guest, Jeremy Scott, co-founded a legendary YouTube channel to kickstart a great cinematic awakening of his own. In 8 years, CinemaSins has delivered 940 sarcastic sermons of sorts, detailing everything wrong with virtually every movie you've ever heard of. Because, as the channel famously states, no movie is without sin, and we exist mostly just to remind you of that. Whether Jeremy thinks cinema's worst sinners will be offered a path to redemption is something we might determine tonight. His congregation has swollen to over 9 million subscribers, and CinemaSins' critiques of everything from The Joker to Toy Story have garnered over 3.5 billion views, and all in a certain number of minutes or less. The truth is that some love CinemaSins while others love to hate CinemaSins, which seems to be the unavoidable nature of movie reviews and analysis on YouTube. There's also the Sincast, which has pumped out nearly 300 audio episodes, and something completely different, a 3-book fiction series about the Ables, a gang of young superheroes in training who overcome, adapt, and leverage both their disabilities and their unique powers. In a video reaming the book he himself wrote, Jeremy found that he'd committed a total of 64 sins in the first one. Right about when this podcast drops, I think, his latest book will come out, Original Sin, From Preacher's Kid to the Creation of CinemaSins, which details Jeremy's really unique singular journey into successful content creation through his one great passion of film. So, Jeremy, we know that books and movies, or YouTube videos, can't ever be perfect. But honestly, what's come the closest that you've seen?
Oh, golly. In terms of YouTube videos?
Let's go with movies. Let's go with films. What's the closest to a perfect film?
Well, if we're going to talk in the voice of CinemaSins, I think the film that has received the fewest sins was District 9. Of course, this was back in our early days before we gave ourselves more time. But I found myself saying a movie like Finding Nemo is pretty much perfect. When I watch a movie like Finding Nemo, I have a hard time finding any decisions that I disagree with. The music choices, the voice work, it hits every note that it's going for right on the head. I think I would answer that one.
Is it hard to watch a new movie and just kind of really appreciate the movie without thinking like I'm really on guard here to identify all the problems with it?
I mean, it just depends on why I'm watching it. If I'm just watching for pleasure, as long as I'm enjoying it, I don't really think about sins or what I might write in the future. But if I'm watching it for the first time while I'm writing sins for a video, it's a little more challenging because I have to rewind a whole bunch and double check certain areas of the screen and what have you, make sure I haven't missed anything. But when it's just leisure watching, I really don't break into looking for mistakes until the movie loses my interest, which probably isn't as often as some people think, but it's probably more often than most.
I think it's interesting that you chose an animated film, Finding Nemo. Do you think, I mean, the gestation period of animated films is so long. Do you think that comes into play with catching mistakes and catching sins? And it just seems like with an animated film, I don't know how long those movies take exactly, but I know it's really, 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 really long.
Sure.
So it seems like there are a lot of people involved. It takes forever. It's a really slow process. It seems like they have a lot of time. They're not cranking things out in like a 6-week shoot like a lot of other films.
They had a lot of money early on, and they were able to stay dedicated to that story first motive and I do think that matters, that long development time. And that's why, Pixar had 7 to 10 home runs in a row when they were starting out, before they really started. I think Cars 2 was their first true misstep. But I don't know a ton about that process. But I know with Ratatouille, they were a couple years into production and then brought in Brad Bird, and he spent the last half of the production and was able to put enough of a stamp on it that movie went from what was considered a mess to what most considered to be brilliant. Mm-hmm. And that's because I do believe they had stricter processes in place. And then, they have more time than somebody at a major studio who's already got their release date for next July and can't budge from it.
Right. Yeah. Because we've talked to a bunch of animators on this podcast. For some reason, I don't know, I always gravitate towards animators. I have so much respect for them. And you hear from them that you really have to think that like a joke, for instance, is really funny because you're going to be working on that one joke for like a month. And after the first like 2 days of it, you just hate it. And guess what? You have like another 400 hours of animating that one stupid joke before it's done,
Yeah. And if you're a singer, you better not record a song on an album that you don't really love playing, because you're going to play that song, a million times for the rest of your career. It's similar to that. I think it really brings the quality to the surface.
There's a series in downtown Las Vegas on Friday nights where they have open free concerts, and they're usually middling kind of performers, who are doing these free concerts, people who were popular in the past and aren't so much now, and a lot of real throwbacks. And sometimes you see somebody who, they were a one-hit wonder in the 60s or 70s, and you look at them and you're like, man, dude, you've played this one song since 1967. It's the only song anybody knows. It's the only song anybody wants from you. And I just wish I knew what it felt like to play that 2-minute, 30-second song 85,000 times for a living, or else you don't eat.
Yep. Can't be easy.
It is a weird thing. I remember reading an interview with Kurt Cobain from Nirvana talking about, and Nirvana was only famous for really like 3 years, feeling like an automaton where, someone just needs to put the quarter in a slot in his back and he'll go out there like a robot and play the music that everybody came to see. So that's after only 3 years, he felt like a robot. I can't even imagine I can't even think of who's a one-hit wonder that comes to mind, Matt, when you think of these people playing in that venue.
Oh gosh. I mean,
well, I can tell you, Right Said Fred is only playing I'm Too Sexy for the rest of his life.
Yeah, so. Who can name another one? Yeah, no, I'm looking it up because it's been 2 years since I was really doing it. But yeah, you get these people who, like Debbie Gibson, who she had quite a few songs, but has made a nice career for herself bouncing back. I think she's got a show with Joey somebody on the Strip. But either way, you're kind of pigeonholed into this stuff.
Yeah, I was thinking like Groove is in the Heart by D-Light. That was
nice.
one that came to mind.
So, Jeremy, this is the big question here. You've probably got this list of, the greatest sins, the things that pop up time and time again. What are they and why do they keep happening?
Oh, well, the ones that happen the most often are just usually screenwriting tricks, like you got to come take a look at this cliche, where I can count on one hand the number of times in real life I've hollered to somebody, "You better come see this," without giving any context whatsoever, as like, "You better come look at what the dog is doing," or what have you. But in a movie, they'll always say, you need to see this. And it's just to build suspense for the viewer. So the viewer is more surprised by what they see. And I don't, in real life, I don't fault a movie for doing that. When I'm wearing the sin hat and trying to find these things for the sake of comedy, then you better believe I'm going to find fault with that kind of thing, because people don't say that in real life. The pronoun game is another one where somebody will walk up to another person and go, "You won't believe what she said." And then the other person has to say, "Who's she?" And then the first person gets this big reveal. But in real life, you would never do that. You would just walk up to your friend and say, "I'll never guess what that jerk Mary said." There's no suspense to it in a real life conversation, but it makes sense why it's there in a movie. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, that makes sense. It almost feels like You Gotta See This is just trying to beat the audience over the head with a hammer for them to pay attention. Like there's like snapping their fingers at you. Like, "Hey, look, don't change the channel. Yeah. Don't go up to go to the bathroom. Please, you have to see this." It's
they
very,
like
very
to build
meta.
cheap. It is. They like to build cheap tension too. Like another one we've noticed a lot is somebody will arrive to a scene and the other person will say, "You're late," and then they'll just go into the scene. Like, there's no consequences for being late. There's never any explanation for why the person was late. It's just cheap dialogue to make sure the viewer knows these two people aren't friends yet. You're late. So that's another one that happens all the time.
Is there a market for such a thing as your analysis here? Like, I write a script. I want it to be twisted, turned, pushed, pulled, debunked, and criticized. All these little holes that I didn't see when I was writing it. I send it to you. You eviscerate it and send me back 91 problems. Does that kind of thing exist?
Well, if it does, I'm not participating. I can tell you we've come close to that.
Seems awesome.
We've come close to that twice. And once it sort of happened informally. But I would never give the advice to a filmmaker that I would put in a Sins video, because the Sins video is a mixture of things, right? It's maybe 25%, 30% legitimate observations or criticisms about the film, logic lapses, things like this. But a good portion of the Sins are just us making stupid jokes, like saying Idaho is not a real place, or being intentionally ignorant. Like, my favorite one ever was when we called the Leonard Cohen Hallelujah in Watchmen one of the worst covers of Leonard Cohen's Hallelujah I've ever heard. Like, we knew that song was him, but we pretended to be ignorant, and all the comments were like, "That's the real Leonard Cohen, you idiot." So the Sins videos are a mixture of all these things. If someone in Hollywood would have said, "Here, eviscerate this script," I would not write anything like "Idaho is not a real place," or "I wish this character was my girlfriend." But
that's useful.
That being said, I think there's a perspective. I know one filmmaker who I'm not going to call out that likes our videos, that has used our videos when developing at least one film to try and avoid certain pratfalls. But I also understand all those filmmakers who would never do that and who think we're trolls. I get it.
It's something that Kevin and I have talked a lot about privately in recent months, because that's exactly what you do with a book. You send it to trusted readers, whether it's a friend or an editor or anybody else, You're like, hey, if we got a continuity problem, show me. If this character is not as interesting as I thought they were when I wrote it, I want to know that. So that's why I said the girlfriend comment is actually useful in a way. Like if that's the feeling that you as a viewer are getting out of that character, it's useful to know. Maybe you should feel that, and maybe you shouldn't.
Sure. Sure.
But yeah, so it's so strange to me that scriptwriters and filmmakers would not embrace this process the way like every competent writer does.
Yeah. I mean, we again, the story's in the book that's coming out in May, but we did get invited out to Paramount by the man at the time who was the president of the studio. And it wasn't a come teach us how to make better movies. It was simply that he had seen one of our videos and we touched on a few topics that he had argued about while the film was in production. And at the time, it seemed like there may be a door for future conversations. But you know how Hollywood is. Like, none of the people we met with work there anymore. And that was only like 4 years ago. So maybe one day, I guess people might think that way, but it's certainly not anything we sought when we set out to make these videos.
Yeah, I think that the ego thing is being underrepresented here as it relates to Hollywood compared to like an author of a book.
Yeah.
I just think those are totally different things. And like you said, the turnover is so high in Hollywood, and it's such a weird industry in general. Like just in terms of trying to keep your job, everybody's like fighting and clawing and scratching all the time, unlike almost any industry, I think. To keep their current job, to get the next one, to not anger anybody who will like blacklist them from getting hired again from this point. Right. Like it's all so volatile that it creates a lot of situations where, probably people, they don't even want your advice because they need to do everything themselves.
Yeah, no, I totally get it. It's not an industry I have ever sought to really work in for all those reasons you just said. Plus, I think it's hard work. I think it's really hard work. And a lot of people out there might have in college, like me, said, I want to make movies someday. Didn't really know what the crap we were talking about. And as I'm an older movie fan now, and I see what goes into directing a movie, and it's not it's not all art direction. A lot of it is putting fingers in the holes in the dike all day long and acting like a general manager of 300 employees. And it's hard work. That's why I'm rambling now. That's the glass of wine I had. That's why I thought Christopher McQuarrie for the last Mission Impossible film should have been nominated for Best Director, because that was an orchestral production that spanned a year or more. And like to pull that off, the directing talent goes just beyond somebody's eye, I think. Anyway.
Yeah. It is a lot of putting out fires and dealing with egos and settling fights. And it's such a weird thing for sure.
Yeah.
A real quick point. You guys were talking about the turnover there. It's less so in like broadly in media, but it's still there. Like the shuffle is crazy. It's worse than like free agents in sports. This is something that came up with us, with the podcast internally, like a month or two ago. We had somebody who we really just wanted to flame. Like every once in a while you have a bad email communication or phone call or something, and you just like want that person to get hit by a bus. This is the way it goes. The problem though is that no matter how bad it is, you go off on them. A year later, they're working at another company and you run into them again. 2 years after that, they're somewhere else and they keep popping up. Like you don't really get rid of people in these industries. And for that reason, you have to handle everything with tact. You have to be professional. You have to pull back on the instinct to really go bonkers on somebody occasionally. But that's a really important skill. We do try to mention the odd thing because we have so many creatives who listen to this. Yeah, don't go bananas. You see YouTubers sometimes like shaming sponsorship offers and things like that on Twitter. Don't do that. Don't do that. Even if you want to. Talk shit privately with your friends. That's what everybody else does. Think it in your head. But be decent in public and to that person, because you will absolutely run into them again and again and again.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah.
Good point.
Yeah. And the role reversal can happen really quickly where, oh, you're a top dog and like, I don't need to deal with this person. And like you said, gosh, 2 years later, all of a sudden they're the top dog. You're the little one. And it's like, all right, maybe you shouldn't have. Yeah.
Yeah.
Did the, what's the peeing character, the Hobbs or the Calvin peeing character that was like a decal on trucks? Remember we talked about that?
Oh yeah.
The Calvin and Hobbes?
Yeah. On the back of like every truck from 1990 to 99.
Yeah. Yeah. Don't be that person peeing on like random industry people because the pee's coming back the other way eventually. There's a high probability of that. That's all.
So what are some of the constant offenders? Like the things that you're almost guaranteed to see in terms of sins.
Well, the first one is the logos, the opening studio logos, and this is one that it legitimately bothers me in real life. In addition to as the Sins narrator guy, because there's no other form of entertainment that opens with studio logos, right? So you don't buy Taylor Swift's latest album and then we pop it in the CD player or pop it in your iPod or whatever the hell you use to listen to music. You don't have to listen to 45 seconds of Interscope Records is proud to present. You get right to the first song. Television shows, they do production logos at the end of the show. And hey, guess what? Some of them are really famous, like Sit Ubu Sit, Good Dog, right, and the Bad Robot one, and Bad Hat Harry, and movies are the only place where we have collectively decided it's okay for you to advertise to me first in the beginning of the actual content I've paid to see. And it drives me crazy. Just get to the movie and advertise to me after. I'll stay if you make those logos interesting, like the TV people do. Treat them like end credit scenes from an MCU film and get creative with them. But, show me the film first. And the other ones that people probably might be expecting almost every video, something like narration or reading. When a film opens with text on the screen, it's not always bad in real life, but we're always going to call that a sin. Just like narration is not always bad. Narration, something like Shawshank Redemption, narration can be wonderful, but we're always going to sin the narration. So
sorry, I was just looking up. I was going to do canon. That's what I was thinking of. I was going to say, in terms of the like the logo at the beginning, the exception to the rule to me would be something like the Canon Group. If anybody's ever seen those movies, because it's almost like with some studios, you got to know what you're getting into before the film starts, and you see like that logo, you're like, all right, here we go. This movie is going to be, I know what type of movie this is going to be. If anybody's unfamiliar, God, there's a documentary just about those guys who made the Canon movies, but it's a lot of like schlocky / amazing action films from the 80s, Bloodsport, Delta Force, Missing in Action, a lot of Chuck Norris kind of things. They made that horrible Masters of the Universe movie, which I think was really what like ruined the company from what I remember from their story. But yeah, I would play devil's advocate a little bit on the opening logo just in case it's like a, I don't know, it's like an appetizer almost.
Fair enough.
We are fans of Bloodsport at the Create Unknown. We send little babies. We send babies with their own names and backstories to everybody in the baby gang. And Mansoor Chinchilla's baby, Dr. Kelp Meat Can, actually was a consultant on Bloodsport. That's what the baby claims. Nobody can figure out exactly what he did, but he claims to know Van Damme quite well. So we keep up on the Bloodsport news.
Well, all right. That's a little beyond my realm of knowledge, but
it's a flawless bad movie, Bloodsport. Like that's one of those movies that, at least for me, there are movies that I loved watching once and would not watch again, like Blade Runner 2049. I loved the experience of watching that in the theater. I feel like it would be sullied, like watching it again at home. Like I just don't want it. I don't know. It seems like it would diminish my memory of it. Things like Bloodsport, if that's on, I will watch it for the 9,000th time. I don't know why.
It's neat because Bloodsport was able to give us in the 80s something. It was the 80s, right? God, I'm old.
Yeah, it was around 88, I think. Yeah,
was able to give us something that mainstream movies didn't usually give us, which was that visceral, real R-rated kind of violence. Even R-rated films at the time were more like Eddie Murphy swears a lot and there's gunfire.
Right.
But Bloodsport was like almost an underground film, not to pardon the pun, in the sense that it was going to show you the kind of combat you were not going to get in any other movie. So yeah, I've seen that movie too many times. That kick jumper, Kickstarter, Kickboxer. I've seen that one a bunch too.
right.
Yeah.
Kickstarter.
Kickboxer didn't quite have the majesty that
No.
Frank Dukes
most of his films
brought to
did
the
not.
screen.
There was a diminishing level of majesty throughout his filmography.
All the way through to Kickboxer 7. Yeah, the majesty diminished. What was the first movie that you really took seriously, that you thought about, that you analyzed, that you did more than just watch and enjoyed or hated?
Oh, wow.
There must have been something at some point in your life that got these juices flowing.
Yeah, it was, I'm going to tell you, it was Terminator 2. It was T2. And I'm in high school at this point. And this movie's just come out on video. My brother comes home from college. I haven't seen movies in the theater my whole life. And mom and dad go away for the weekend. And the older brother's like, I'm going to let you try a beer and I'm going to let you watch Terminator 2. And he spent maybe an hour explaining the first Terminator movie to me so that I would be floored in the second one when Arnold turned out to be a good guy. And he set it up perfect. And, most of the movies I'd seen up to this point had been, I'd seen the Star Wars movies, I'd seen the Muppet movies, I'd seen a lot of Disney films, but I'd never seen anything that looked like this with that liquid metal Terminator. But also that had this high of a concept that treated my mind as something to stimulate as well as my eyeballs. Just the ideas this movie wants you to wrap your heads around. And, it's probably somewhere in my top 25. It's not in my top 10 now, but that's certainly the movie that first made me go, whoa, movies can be so much more than just candy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think that's the best action film of all time, Terminator 2. I think we had this discussion on the podcast and there was a little bit of an argument. I don't remember what the counter examples were.
I think I probably gave some stupid counter examples. Like I probably made the case that Over the Top was better.
Yeah, well, come on.
Yeah.
No one takes that seriously except you.
Yeah,
which is okay.
I mean, I knew this podcast was going to be trash when I asked what's the only movie that the closest to perfect, and I didn't hear Over the Top. I thought, well, clearly this guy's head is in his ass.
You should have worn your hat for this podcast.
I wear it every day.
I
wear it every single day.
Oh my goodness.
Same one that, speaking of sins, like, I don't go too hard into identifying problems because I can't really analyze film on that level. But I do with things like historical accuracy, things with guns and Westerns, like the rate of fire on a whole lot of guns in Westerns that were before cartridges. So at a certain point, you have to pour the powder in, put a wad in, put a ball in, crank a lever to jam that lead ball in, and then put a seal over top of it, then put the primer on a cap. And then you have to do that 6 times for the whole cylinder. Mm-hmm. This is not cool in a movie. They just bang, 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 bang. I'll notice that kind of thing. But
wait,
but
6 shooters were that laborious?
Before the cartridge, yeah. Before they were a self-contained cartridge that you would just put in the cylinder. Yeah, you had to hand load them with a cap and ball. But I do want to throw Over the Top under the bus. That's why I'm bringing this up, because it's the most egregious sin that I can think of in a movie that I've actually watched. Halfway through the movie, Sylvester Stallone's character's name changes.
What?
It goes from Lincoln Hawk to Lincoln Hawks. And it has blown my mind that nobody on the set was like, hey, we're not using the right name anymore. Let's use the name we used in the first 45 minutes. It's insane to me. I don't know how that one gets by. I truly don't know how that mistake gets by.
You know how it gets by? Booze and cocaine.
Oh my God, that's amazing.
It's the 80s. That's how it got by. Hawks.
That's
That was
amazing.
probably just somebody slurring on set. It's Hawks.
Maybe. We just did Mighty Ducks for one of our videos, and we noticed one of the characters' jersey has the actress's name on the back instead of the character's name on the back. And we were pretty puzzled by that one. Like, who was the seamstress? They got all the other characters' last names correct on the jerseys, but this one girl, they put her actress name on the back. And we were like, was that like a gift? Everybody get a gift and she wore the wrong one that day of filming, or what? Like, anyway, it was bizarre.
Yeah.
It was a bizarre thing that I can't figure out how it came to be.
That is weird. I really want to ask, because you brought this up earlier, and I've been forgetting to ask, and that's you mentioned kind of trolling as part of your humor style in the videos, where you'll say something that you know is not true just for a reaction. How do you deal with people taking that stuff seriously and hating you because they think you're an idiot when you're literally making a joke, but they can't tell the difference? Like, and I know, it's the internet, and like a certain percentage of the audience will not be able to understand the joke. And if they even find out it's a joke, they won't think it's funny, and they still think you're dumb. So how do you deal with blowback from your videos?
I think in the beginning it was more difficult because we weren't really expecting it, and you could say we're naive, but we didn't know anything about Poe's law and how 20% of people on the internet will misunderstand sarcasm and all that. We didn't know anything about that until we started. And so, we'll say something so obviously joking to us, like Idaho is not a real place, and we'll get so many responses from people who are like, "You're American. How can you not know where Idaho is? It's a whole state." And I never expected that level. And, I can't do anything about how people feel about me, whether they think I'm stupid for those sins or they think that I'm evil because I'm watering down the discourse of film or what have you. I've heard about all the variations of it, and I long ago made peace with the fact that all I can do is make sure the people around me that I touch every day think I'm a good person and don't think I'm an idiot and don't think I'm evil. I certainly can't control the internet, and if I try, I'm going to lose focus of what got me here in the first place anyway, which was just put my head down in writing. So I try not to let it bother me. In the beginning, that was not as easy as it is now.
Mm-hmm.
Is it inevitable that everybody who watches you is eventually going to hate you? Because look, like hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of movies, you're going to rip on something that is absolutely precious to them at some point. The longer you go, it's like you're guaranteed not to have any survivors at the end of the line.
The people who have been with us the longest and know what we're doing, I think those people appreciate when we send their favorite movies. But yes, what you're saying in general is true. Everybody has a favorite movie. Every video we do, every single one, there's somebody out there who's like, "How dare you? I can't believe you even touched this masterpiece." Every single movie we do, more on some than others, but it's not unique to just the big MCU films or what have. Like we did, what did we just do? Jerry Maguire recently, and people were like, "Oh, it's a masterpiece," and I'm like, I like Jerry Maguire, but we did Citizen Kane. You think we wouldn't do Jerry Maguire? Come on. Like, nothing's really off limits for us. So, shrug.
How dare you disgrace Turner and Hooch? Sorry.
Turner and Hooch.
Everybody who doesn't know who Turner and Hooch is, Google it right now, and you will laugh because you'll...
It's way better than Over the Top.
We had a pair of rescue squirrels that were found on the side of the road about 2 years ago, and before we gave, I believe there's always somebody who will like nurse everything back to health, and we found somebody like 40 miles away who exclusively deals in squirrels and chipmunks that have been abandoned. And yeah, we named them Tango and Cash as we fed them with an eyedropper for like 48 hours.
Talk about a watchable piece of trash. That's Tango and Cash. Like that movie. Sorry if it's your second favorite. It's not good, but I love it. It's ridiculous, I think, though.
Is that the worst movie that you enjoy? There's got to be one that's just absolute garbage you still like.
Oh, man, a bunch. I really like watching that 2015 Ed Helms Vacation reboot, which I freely admit is not good.
I forgot that existed. Holy cow.
I know. I love Demolition Man. Yes. I love Horrible Bosses.
Yeah, that's come up before on this podcast.
Speaking of Jean-Claude, I will go to bat for Time Cop and Sudden Death any day of the week.
Wow.
I love myself some trashy movies.
Can you, just for our audience, because this movie is so ridiculous, briefly describe the plot of Sudden Death?
Sudden Death is about a fire inspector who takes his kids to Game 7 of the Stanley Cup Finals in Pittsburgh and drops them off at the seats to go inspect the fire things. But this also happens to be the night that terrorists have taken over the vice president's luxury suite at the game. And
we've all been there.
One kid wanders away, and the mascot is a bad guy, Karate Girl. And let's just say, before the movie's over, Jean-Claude's fire inspector ends up in goal for the Pittsburgh Penguins and blocks a shot. I kid you not. It is the most amazing display of absurdity you will ever see. I love it so much.
Thank you.
That script sounds like a Mad Lib. You just put different things in and have a movie at the end.
I think that's how they wrote it. I think that's exactly how they wrote it.
So going back to people hating you because that's awesome. Is that a viable? Let's go deep into how badly you suck. Now, is it a viable thing though? Because we've talked to people in the commentary community about this in the past. Is it viable to have something like a YouTube channel where there's almost like this hate to subscriber pipeline? You know, let's say you make a video that's about a movie that somebody loves. They're pissed off at your analysis of it. They maybe hate watch the next one. And, 7 videos later, they're into you. They get what you do. And they're part of the team. Is that?
Yeah. My favorite example is a kid who watched our very second video, the Avengers, Marvel's The Avengers, and made a video longer than our video, where he had his laptop next to him and he would watch our video and then pause it and then turn to the camera and explain why we were wrong. And within 2-3 weeks, that kid realized it was all a joke and became one of our bigger fans. We even referenced him on a podcast and he came in the comments and said, "That was me." So, that at least happened one time. But yes, there is a certain amount of the negativity that drives discourse, and the discourse drives all sorts of things, whether it's search stuff with Google or showing up in related or suggested videos in YouTube's algorithm, or if somebody makes a video, here's all the reasons CinemaSins sucks. Our videos are going to show up to the right in the suggested videos, and we're going to get traffic from that. The worst days for me are when somebody in Hollywood that I respect just tweets about how much they hate CinemaSins. I hate that, but it always increases our rate of subscribers and increases our rate of views, always. So I take the good with the bad, I guess. I want everybody to like me, but it's good for business that they don't.
Have you ever gone too far? Have you ripped something a little harder than you should have and regretted it after? 940 videos. You had to have pushed the envelope a little too far at some point.
I don't know that I've gone too far in terms of the target, the movie target. I think there are some jokes I would want back that, in the very beginning, the joke we use, because of course, let me explain. What we're doing is we're playing a sort of a character. The idea was, what if somebody like the Simpsons comic book nerd had his own YouTube channels? Well, this guy, he thinks he knows everything, and he's not always going to be right, but he's sometimes going to be right, and he's probably going to be horny. And so early on, we would write sins like this scene does not contain a lap dance, which has become the bane of my existence in terms of people who hate our channel. They'll just point to that and say it's just a bunch of perverts. We haven't made that joke in 7 years, because we realized early on this is being read as a little too pervy. Like, we wanted to make sure that this is a basement dwelling know-it-all movie nerd, and he's going to like hot girls, but people are misunderstanding this and thinking that we're that way. So we softened that. So now, for a while it became so and so is not my girlfriend in this scene. Or if there's a really pretty girl and she was on the phone, we would say, I am not the phone in this scene. So I would love to go back to those early videos and rewrite those lap dance sins to make them a little more palatable, because I think it was an early dividing line for people who weren't sure how serious to take us. There may be a couple other jokes that I would take back, but only because I continue to learn and grow. And as much as we want to make jokes, and this guy's a little bit edgy, we don't want to offend regular viewers or filmmakers. So it's constantly evolving.
And has the audience changed from when you started to now? Like, is there any patterns, anything that just the viewers are different now than before?
In YouTube, one for all their problems, and I could do a whole guest appearance about problems with YouTube, but they give us lots of data. They give us so much data that we pay somebody to sift through it all and spit it back out to us in actionable, understandable means. And so early on, we noticed it was largely male, and about half young males up to about 25, and half 25 to 40-something males. And only like 10, 12% of our viewers were female. And so we started intentionally sinning movies that we thought might draw in a female audience, like Frozen, which is, I think, still our most viewed video of all time, or Tangled. And it helped. It worked. We could see the female viewership. YouTube will tell you, again, for the most part, you're trusting that this YouTube user has answered honestly when they signed up for their account, so that they really are male and that age, and they really do live in New Zealand or what have you. But the data is really fascinating in terms of where the viewer comes from, how long they stay, how long they watch, what do they watch after they're done watching your video. Really, really powerful, actionable data on the back end, for sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Real quick. I know that we have to get to your book before we run out of time. But I just wanted to go back a second to the joke thing that I just personally, just anecdotally find it interesting, how aware you have to be of, even if you think like a joke is funny and you're playing a character and that character would be that level of vulgar or just say something gross.
Right.
You can't do that because you know that a certain percentage of people will take that literally, and it's not worth it. It's not worth their ire, and it's not worth upsetting them or offending them or hurting them to make that joke. So you just, like you said, soften the bat. I just find that interesting. The process there, I just think is interesting to hear about.
People will take audio clips from a Sins video, sometimes chop it up and then post it someplace else to make it sound like I've said something worse than I have. So that's something I try not to think about too much, or I'd lose sleep for forever. Because I've said virtually every word in the English language. But yeah, it's not something that we thought would be a problem when we started. And as we've been along, we've realized, yeah, okay, let's not make this kind of joke that seems to be, a little more sensitive a topic. And I'm sure we'll come across something else again here in the future. But yeah, everybody's different. Everybody's sensitive to different things. So.
But let's jump, like Kevin said, let's jump from film to books, because you got a few. Firstly, let's do the opening round with the Ables, because you had a cool pipeline with that, with self-publishing it and then going the traditional route and then doing a couple more. And the newest book is a departure from that. But where did that come from, the Ables series?
I had sketched out a little on a lined piece of notebook paper, or a little character breakdown, 2006. So this is 6 years before CinemaSins even exists. And I sketched out a troupe of senior citizen superheroes who were all ailing and disabled. And one was a judge. And anybody that slipped through the system, the judge would activate the team and they would go enact justice with their superpowers. And
It's a
that
good
lived
premise.
with me off and on for 2-3 years. And then I had the idea to age them way down and make them kids. And I got sort of fascinated with the idea of superheroes caught in between two worlds, right? Superhero movies always give us two main characters to focus on: the hero with powers and their buddy who's just a human and doesn't have powers, and how they view the whole situation. I thought, what if there was somebody in between? What if there's somebody like my main character, Philip, who has telekinesis and can move things with his mind, but he's blind, so he can't see anything? How does he go about learning how to use his powers? He's not going to be accepted by the superhero world, but he's not just human. And so that was my starting point. And I wrote a chapter, showed it to my wife. She loved it, and it just would not leave me alone. And then when CinemaSins took off somewhere around 2014, I went, you know what? There's an audience here. I can at least market this thing to, whether or not it sells well. So I finished writing it and knocked it out, and we did pretty well. I was pretty happy with how that first one sold. Then was approached by Turner Publishing to reissue that first book and publish the next three, two of which have already come and gone. And yeah, I'm really proud of it. I think there's some good disability representation in superhero stories and comic books, but maybe not enough. I'm disabled. I have less than 50% of my hearing left, and I've been diagnosed with depression and anxiety, and I'm pretty upfront about it. So, the books are just another way for me to try and destigmatize the topic of disabilities and let people out there know they can be heroes, even if someone tells them they can't.
Did you have any pushback from people in the disabled community about you writing this? Because you mentioned that you have a few disabilities, but not the ones that your characters have.
Right.
So, for example, you're not blind. You're not in a wheelchair.
Right.
Was there any friction there?
I saw a little bit of pushback from people who simply didn't know and said that I was an able-bodied person writing about disabilities. And where I was able, I just corrected and said, I'm actually disabled. And then one criticism was, how do I say this correctly? My main character is blind. All of my characters have something about their disability that gets in the way of using their powers. But by about a third of the way through that first book, they're working together to utilize each other's strengths to make everybody's powers work as strong as possible. And so I had a couple people accuse me of writing a blind character only to give him a version of sight 12 chapters in.
Through
to those
his friends.
all I would say is just have to wait and read the rest, because that's partially true, but the whole journey is the whole 4 books, and he loses it again. So anyway.
So you've got the 2 out, 1 on the way, and there's a 4th, you said? That's planned?
3 out. 4th will be a year and a half away. I write a lot of books. So 3 Abel's books, and then the one that's due next week, or as this comes out, is the memoir, Original Sin, which sort of charts my upbringing as a preacher's kid, my time as a movie theater manager, and then how CinemaSins came to be. And then I just turned in a murder mystery that will be out in the summer of 2022. It's not connected to any other book I've written. And then I got to get started on the final Abel's book, the 4th and final Abel's book. So I write too much.
How'd you get going on the writing stuff? Because that's kind of prolific output. I mean, people switch gears and write books, but they usually don't write 4 or 5 of them in 3 different verticals.
Yeah. My wife just said to me the other day, you've written 5 books. And I was like, that's crazy to think about. I think I just enjoyed the journey on that first one and that first Abel's book that I self-published. And I learned so much that the subsequent books I've been able to fully flush out before I started writing. That first Abel's book I just wrote without knowing where I was going. And that kind of preparation makes it more fun to write. These characters become, almost real people to me. And I start to care about where their lives are going. And I just got the bug. I even said, when I finished the murder mystery, I said to my wife, I'm taking 3 weeks off. I'm not writing anything. And 4 days later, I had a new manuscript started. So I think I just can't. It's part of my DNA now. I can't stop.
We have to get to our patrons' questions before we
Sure.
let you go eat dinner. But I would just say, I just want to ask you real quick about your writing process, because I've been working on a novel for a long time, and I can't get any work done unless I have nothing else to do, unless I carve out specific time, like a month or 2 months at a time, and just shut everything out and work on that. Otherwise, I can't like sit down an hour a night after dinner and just, work on a chapter. It doesn't work. So I'd love to hear what your experience is with your workflow on that.
You may not appreciate my advice, but I use an egg timer. Part of my anxiety is that I'm super easily distracted. I can barely go 15, 20 minutes at a time without needing to stand up and walk away to the other side of the house and do something else. It stresses me out to sit still for a really long time. So I sit down with a kitchen timer and I say, I'm going to spend 20 minutes on this book, or I'm going to spend 30 minutes on this book. And when the timer goes off, I'm going to get up and I'm going to go do something else. I'm not going to think about anything else. I'm just going to go play with my dog or what have you, play a video game. And that builds repetition, and the repetition builds and snowballs. And that's the best I can tell you, is that when I started the first Abel's book, I would stay late at work. I had a day job, and I would write from 5 to 6. And then as I got going and got closer to the end, I was writing from 5 to 7 or 5 to 8, because the momentum I had built made me want to stay in that place and keep writing. But to start that momentum, you just have to be regimented. For me, I find a kitchen timer works. It just keeps me, that ticking that constantly here, blocks out the rest of the world. But I do it in these short little bursts, short little blocks till I get some momentum going. That would be my advice.
Okay, yeah, that's definitely the opposite of what I've been doing, which is just...
We've heard other people, though, who have a similar kind of regimented schedule, and it seems to work or not.
Yeah, it's very interesting, and that's why I really wanted to ask you, because I love hearing what people's different ways they go about it are, because it does seem to be all over the map. So whatever works for you, and it's fascinating to me. All right, Matt, do we have questions that we can throw from our patrons before we wrap up?
Yeah, we do. We've got a bunch, and so I'm going to combine them because some of them are thematically similar. I want to start with two of them here. It's a combination from Dan the Latch and the Kino Corner. The Kino Corner has a YouTube channel that does film analysis and criticism, and also has the Kino Cast with Oki, who was our guest 2 episodes ago. Oki's Weird Stories. So first off, Dan's half, is CinemaSins criticism or satire?
Oh, neither. I mean, there's a little bit of both in there. But we consider ourselves a comedy channel, first and foremost. And, there was a famous director who didn't like us, and then people defended us by telling we were satire, and then he went off on the word satire and the definition of that word, and I have never publicly claimed that we are satire. There are apparently dictionary disciples. The most I would say is we're playing a character. Maybe it's a parody. It's an exaggeration. But don't take our videos for film criticism or for satire. Our podcast, I think we offer some solid film criticism from time to time, but the videos are never meant for that. It's just for really observant, nitpicky movie fans to celebrate and enjoy nitpickery.
And this is Kino's half of the question, which I think you just gave the answer to. Do you think CinemaSins is real film criticism, whatever that phrase means?
No. There are bits in each video that I think count as real criticism, or that I would make as a real point if I were criticizing it as myself. But no, the videos as a whole are just, it's just a celebration of how obsessive people can get. When you watch a movie over and over and over and over and over again, you start to notice all these little things. Some of them bother you, some of them don't. None of them keep that from being your favorite movie ever, but it's those little details that we're trying to have fun pointing out and just sort of sharing with each other. We're certainly trying to celebrate film and not drive people away from it.
Right. No, that makes sense. These next two I'm going to combine as well because they play off each other. Isaac asked how you come up with the sins. Do you watch the film over and over? Do you watch it with other people and talk about the ideas? Do you do research online for it? And Jeff's half of the question is, how much time does all of that take for each video?
Yeah. Used to be I would watch a film, back when it was just Chris and I would watch a film 2 or 3 times while writing Sins. These days, I just go through a movie once, but that's a lot of rewinding and rewatching. So I think I'm still ultimately watching it 2 to 3 times. But we calculated at one point, and we have some writers now and some editors, but it's about 40 total hours for the writing and the editing of a Sins video. Now that's spread, in our case, across anywhere from 3 to 5 different people. So nobody is working 40 hours on any single video. But yeah, I would say, most of our writers are spending about 8 to 10 hours writing. And so that's, 16 to 20 before it ever goes to the editors. And then if you've ever dealt with Adobe Premiere, then, there's another 12 hours right there. So.
With how intensive these are, Dan also asked, did you start making longer videos because that fit YouTube better? Did it change the quality of the videos when you started to do 20-minute kind of things?
We hope not. We lucked into some of these algorithmic changes, and we were obsessed in the beginning with keeping things under 4 minutes, 5 minutes. We thought for sure the attention span was going to be too small. And we got to the movie The Room, which is almost Rocky Horror Picture Show-like in its fame now. And we just couldn't do it under 5 minutes. It was just impossible. That movie is just atrocious. And so we put out, I think it was a 10-minute video, and it got just as many views as ever or more. And we were like, oh, maybe people don't care about the time limit. When we got around to Batman and Robin later that year, we did like a 20-minute video for the first time ever, and it was one of our most watched of the year. And so that really allowed us a bunch of things, right? So early on in the Avengers, the second video we ever made, Tony's up in space, right? He takes that nuke up into space and fires at the aliens, and then he falls back through the portal. But he should not be falling at that point. There's no gravitational reason at that point in space for him to be sucked back into the portal. But because this was a point where we were trying to keep videos under 4 minutes, the sin in that video is there's no gravity in space, but Tony still falls. Well, of course there's gravity in space. I just misspoke, but it became one of the most infamous mistakes we've ever made because there is gravity in space, just maybe not enough in that one instance. And so what making the videos longer has allowed us to do is extrapolate some of those points to where instead of just giving you 4 words that you're going to misunderstand, I can now give you 2 sentences that will make, that will both give you my sin and stave off your rebuttal that I know you're going to make. So I think in the end, it's made our content better because it's allowed us to express our thoughts more clearly.
This one's from Isaac. Do you think CinemaSins would be as popular as it is today without the criticism of the sins? Like, do you think had you gone straight up good guy through the whole thing and everybody loves you, would that have changed the outcome?
Have I gone straight up what?
Good guy. Everything is extremely positive and everybody loves you. I mean, I know you can't be super positive about sins, but would that have really changed the trajectory?
No. I mean, listen, if we had started out and our video series had been called Cinema Notes, and instead of everything wrong with it was things we noticed about, this channel would never have taken off. I'm not trying to be a dick. There is something about the divisive nature of the phrasing. Our video titles are everything wrong with. That challenges you immediately to disagree or agree, and that starts discussion. And that was a very intentional choice. I do see some criticism sometimes that Chris and I are just clickbait scam marketers because we spent some time doing video search engine optimization. But that's just smart video search engine optimization to know that divisive wording is going to drive more traffic than happy wording. That's just smart marketing. It's not like there's no clickbait there. Anyway,
if I see cinema constructive criticism, I'm probably scrolling by. I'm just not interested. Dan Latch, this is a really good question. What was the first movie that you saw in a theater or not in a theater that you thought was bad before the film ended?
Oh my.
There had to have been an original stinker in your history.
You have to understand, in college, my roommates, I lived in a suite, so we had 6 roommates and we shared one bathroom. It was an awesome setup. But every Friday we had bad movie night where we took turns going to the nearby video store and we intentionally rented 3 of the worst looking movies we could find. And then we would just sit through them and laugh and joke and have fun and eat popcorn. I didn't walk out of any of those, but all of those movies were bad before they got to the end. But I did walk out in theaters. I did walk out of the Sarah Michelle Gellar magical bakery movie, Simply Irresistible, before that finished. I don't know if you recall this movie.
I never heard of that. No.
It was in the early 2000s, I think, maybe late 90s.
It sounds like it was extremely resistible.
It was totally resistible. She's a chef, and through magic, her cooking is so good it makes people fall in love with her. And she has a crab who's a friend pet, and he hangs out in the kitchen and watches her cook. And it's suggested that he's the source of the magic. And at the end of the movie, there's this big ball, and she and the guy from Alias are dancing or something, and it cuts to the fucking crab in a tuxedo watching. And I got up and said, all right, that's it for me. I'm out of here, folks. And I don't even know how much was left. I was gone. I was in my car. I was done with that movie.
You mentioned on bad movie nights eating popcorn. Marco had a question about this. Do you eat popcorn while you watch movies? Is there a specific flavor? And if you prefer something else, we want to hear that.
I'm a big fan of, okay, here's the deal. Working in a movie theater for as long as I did, one of the perks, if you're a manager, end of the night, leftover popcorn, you can take it home because it's not like they can serve it the next day unless you're this one evil manager I had that I did call food services on. Don't yell at me. So again, having 5 other roommates in a college suite, I'd come home every night with a garbage bag full of popcorn. I was the hero. But it put me off popcorn working in that job. I couldn't eat it for maybe 15 years. The smell of it just brought back these memories. But only within the last 3 or 4 years, I've started to enjoy popcorn again at the movies. And I don't flavor it. I just put some butter on there and some salt, and that's good enough for me. Although my wife likes to flavor it with all kinds of funky stuff. But I just like butter and salt.
The classic. Next one is from Jen, who works on Out of Frame. If you guys haven't seen the Out of Frame channel on YouTube, they look at TV shows and movies, analyze them for some kind of social and political themes, and do a really excellent, fair job with that. It's really kind of one of the best channels in this genre. And she works on that with Sean Malone, who we had on as a guest a long, long time ago talking about Stranger Things. She asks, what's something that you generally count as a sin that you actually really love as a consumer of film? There's got to be a guilty pleasure sin somewhere in there.
That's a good question. I think it's probably the candles. Like, I love a good mood setting, right? I love a good vibe from a movie. And one of the ways the movies do this is to put candles everywhere. I think we joked about Jupiter Ascending earlier, but I think there's a scene in that movie with like 1,000 freaking candles on the floor. And it looks cool, man. It always looks awesome. And I always enjoy it as a viewer. But the sin side of me is always forced to wrestle with the practicality of all those candles. Like in the, I think it was Great Gatsby. Somebody's going around putting out all the candles after the party, and I'm like, Jesus, by the time he's done, it's going to be time to light all of them again the next morning. Like, it's just ridiculous when you break it down from a practical standpoint. But the visuals of having a lot of candlelight, I totally love. I totally get that.
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, the logistics of candles are a very real thing, from setup to lighting to take down. This is the last question we've got, and then we can get you to dinner and your family. We want to say this to the end because it's about writing. It's about the book. And we'll put links to your books in the description of this. So you guys can check out the Able series and the Sin origin story, which is on its way. Trev asks, at what point in developing a concept for a book do you just start writing? How much of the book's story do you have to have figured out beforehand, if any at all?
This is a good question. I've done it.
That's a great question.
I've done it multiple ways. The first Abel's book, I did not know where I was going. And in hindsight, I had a lot of heavy editing to do because I meandered. The second and third Abel's book, I did what I call outlines. And for me, it's just the beats. I want to know at least 4 or 5 main story beats. The characters start here. By chapter 5 or 6, they encounter this kind of a situation. And I like to have the climax, at least the general idea, figured out. It's going to be these people in this place against this person. But you can't plan it all. If you try and plan it all, you're going to paralyze yourself and you'll never get started. Just plot out the beats and the characters, where you want to move the pieces in a general way, but then get from beat to beat as you write, and give yourself the freedom to get from point A to point B spontaneously, instead of locking yourself in early to that particular route.
I think that fits with books, with videos. It's there's a phrase in entrepreneurship, analysis paralysis, where you sit and like rethink your business plan and don't actually start the business. You know, you're not going to be right with whether it's a book plot or character development or a YouTube video or a business. You're going to make some mistakes along the way, and you don't know until you've made them. And then you adjust and you figure it out, but you keep moving. And so what you just described, I think that's excellent advice for pretty much every project ever, aside from like building a house. You don't want to half-ass building a house. You do have to plan that out properly.
You do need to know the beats.
Everything creative. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, you got to have the beats, but all the creative stuff, all the business stuff, I think that's awesome. You outline it, you get the beats, you get going, and adjust along the way.
Yeah.
I'm just annoyed, Matt. You've never told me the phrase analysis paralysis before. How has that never come up?
You tuned me out. You've tuned me out since like 2014. Yeah. I bet I've said it 100 times.
That's gotta be what it is. I was finally listening to you because you were compelling for once, and I love that analysis paralysis. I want to get that tattooed on my forearm.
It's totally real. It's the number one thing that I encounter when I talk to people about YouTube stuff, whether it's at a conference and I'm doing a thing or just casually like in Twitter DMs. Man, just start the thing. Just get going. You know, get the basic idea down and get going. It's absolutely going to be better than if you sit there and try to make the perfect video, which, as we know, no video is going to be without sin. So it's not going to be perfect anyway. You might as well just start.
That's right. All right, we're gonna let you go, but check out CinemaSins if for some reason you just got back from Mars on like an 8-year tour or something and you don't know CinemaSins, check that out. You may not be familiar though with the book that is coming out, Original Sin: From Preacher's Kid to the Creation of CinemaSins. Jeremy Scott, thanks so much for hanging out with us, and have a great dinner.
Thanks for having me. I really appreciate your guys' time and the time of your listeners, and I don't take it for granted. And let me know when the episode drops publicly, and I'm happy to promote it on my Twitters and such.
We will do that.
All right.
Thanks.
We'll
see
guys.
you, Space Cowboys.
Thanks for listening to The Create Unknown. We'd like to extend a huge thank you and congratulations to the Tots and Dumpster crew who save tiny little lives every month. A tremendous shout out to our elite baby gang: Trevstead, Boromir, Bot Dogs, Chinchilla, Isaac, Conrad, James, Jeff Davis, Patrick Pister, Baseweight, and Dojangles. And thank you to our grizzled, battle-hardened child infantry: Jen Mefisanti, Kevin Menard, Mikhail Steinke, Risebread, Sean Malone, Triple Question Mark, Monahan, Ryan Kinder, Sheep, and Maruko. Thank you as well to our producer and editor Ben Webster, and to our media manager Dan Yosua. The Create Unknown is an Unknown Media production.